Welcome to People and Profit, your essential business briefing. Coming up, they're the biggest supplier of telecoms equipment in the world. So why are countries increasingly turning away from Huawei? As talks resume over the US-China trade war, we look at the impact American tariffs have already had on Chinese businesses. And some snouts out of joint in the truffle industry, why French producers say they need government help to stay competitive. First up, though, to what has become one of the most controversial names in the technology sector, Huawei. The Chinese company is a global leader in telecoms equipment and one of the world's biggest smartphone makers. But the US Congress and others have warned that Beijing could use Huawei's equipment to spy on the world. The company disagrees. It's been charged in the United States with stealing trade secrets and breaking Iran's sanctions, with its chief financial officer arrested in Canada as a result. Meanwhile, in China, Huawei remains a huge source of national pride, as our correspondent Charles Pellegrin reports.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6， 一共6部手机。
Guhao is a flower seed, the nickname for Huawei fans. Unhappy with owning 6 of the brand's phones, he also wants to buy another for one of his relatives, only to find out it's out of stock.
It's empty again.
He says he loves the brand so much because its products are consumer-friendly and affordable. He's among those in China who say the company is a source of national pride.
In the past, many liked using Apple or Samsung. Now more people have come to accept Huawei because its phones are easy to use. It's an essential factor.
In addition to being the world's second biggest producer of smartphones, Huawei also leads the way in telecom equipment. That makes it a key player in the race to build the next generation of wireless networks, known as 5G.
Huawei is the only company that has designed a complete industrial chain stretching from chipset to terminal. In the global 5G field, Huawei is a strong and symbolic company. Its technology and comprehensive ability is ahead of its rivals.
Outside of China, however, Huawei raises suspicion. The United States has accused the company of being a security risk because of its proximity to the Chinese government. It has banned it from its 5G networks. Huawei did not respond to France 24's request for an interview, but has previously said that it fully respects and protects customer privacy. That hasn't been enough to convince governments elsewhere, though, with several European countries considering blocking the use of Huawei's technology too.
Well, to talk a little bit more about the concerns around Huawei, I'm joined in studio by the cybersecurity expert Loic Guézou. Thank you very much for coming in to speak to us. Where is the problem around Huawei? Why are governments so concerned about this company?
Well, actually, there is a big concern regarding cybersecurity risk using these products. There is a big link, historical link between the founder and the People Liberation Army and the Chinese government. So the big fear is for being spied if you used Huawei products.
Why is this coming up now in relation to 5G? What is it about 5G that's brought this issue to the fore? Because Huawei's been around for a long time and doing quite well in many Western markets.
So actually, this is a long story. This is not starting now, but because of the 5G dynamism in the market, there is a new war, a commercial war between other countries, maybe US, the first is US, and China, for, I would say, the monopoly of the 5G market in the next years.
And there seems to be a difference of opinion between governments as well on this. In America, obviously, there's a very strong movement against the company. European countries don't seem as sure. Why is there this divergence, do you think?
Well, I think this divergence is based on the clear commercial opposition between US and China. This opposition is not so clear between Europe and China. So Europe is not directly fighting against Huawei. We have in Europe concern regarding the possible spying with Huawei products. So we are very clear to avoid this risk by not using this kind of product, maybe in the core network of very critical infrastructure, for example.
And what is the critical element of this? Is this the connectivity that will come with 5G?
Absolutely, it's the connectivity. Huawei is one of the only manufacturer able to provide this technology at this level of efficiency today. So it's a kind of a monopolistic approach by technology. So if you have the risk of being spied and no other possibility than using Huawei product, there is a concern for I would say, the next step of evolution of our infrastructures, especially the 5G.
You talked about this commercial opposition in the United States. There's lots of suspicion that this is a commercial as well as a security, I suppose, concern that's being raised in the US. Are there competitors there ready to pick up this business if Huawei is excluded from taking part in it?
It seems that today Huawei is really the number one and the leading provider in these technologies. But there are some Europeans also working on that, and with I would say some effort from the local government, we should be able to have European players able to compete at a very high and right level with Huawei products.
Is there anything that Huawei could do to convince the United States government, governments in Europe, to use that their products are as secure as they say they are?
It's very difficult because these kind of products are very complex. One of the ways to make things happen is to open what we call the source code. So open the way your products are written. It's very technical, it's feasible, but it's difficult. So this is one way, and I don't think Huawei is going on this way. The other way is for the local government to use, I would say, other technologies to balance the risk of the threats based on Huawei products. So by mixing technology, we can mitigate the risk of being very dependent and spied by Huawei products.
And is that practical, to use different technologies to try and build this network?
Yes, to use different technology is very practical. This is maybe some way of best practices to be used in other fields. When we discuss cybersecurity topics, it's very common to recommend to use 2 or 3 technologies to really be able to commit on no risk or what level of risk is in the infrastructure.
So this can be constructed safely, you're saying, and securely?
Yeah, absolutely, yeah.
Okay, Loic Izu, cybersecurity expert, thank you very much for speaking to us. I should repeat that we did ask Huawei to speak to us. Our correspondent in China did, but they declined that opportunity. Moving on, America's top trade official and the US Treasury Secretary have gone to Beijing for the latest round of talks on the trade dispute with China. Robert Lighthizer and Stephen Mnuchin are hoping to make progress on issues ending the forced transfer of technology from American companies to their Chinese partners and curbing industrial subsidies. The US has already imposed tariffs on $250 billion of Chinese imports. Washington has threatened to more than double the levy on the majority of those goods if a deal isn't reached in the coming weeks. So what's the concrete impact in China? Kate Moody's been finding out. Kate.
Well, Stephen, the Chinese products that have been singled out for higher American tariffs are shown in this graph in red. Electric machinery is the most impacted, followed by industrial equipment, then smaller sectors like furniture, toys, plastics, and vehicles. Proportionally, it's not a huge amount of the total products sold, but the tariffs are being felt. China's robotics industry, for example, had been growing as much as 30% each month, but it started stagnating towards the end of 2018, and in December, output was 12% lower than a year earlier. Concerns are growing, with Chinese companies from banks to airlines to pet food manufacturers all mentioning the trade tensions in their outlooks. The broader Chinese economy is also starting to reflect the prolonged standoff. Exports rose at the beginning of last year, with manufacturers trying to front-load their orders or ensure their supplies before tariffs kicked in. But by December, exports were down 4.4% compared to 12 months earlier. That contributed to the economy's lowest growth rate in nearly 3 decades. Uncertainty also weighed on stock markets, with the Shanghai Composite shedding nearly 25%. In one bright spot, investors have since rushed back, pouring a record $9 billion into Chinese equities this January alone. It's a small sign of optimism that the trade war will ultimately be diffused. Now, it's not just China that's feeling the pinch, but its neighbors too. The UN warned that businesses would shift away from Asian supply chains and that the region could see exports drop by $160 billion. A survey of corporate leaders in China, Japan, and South Korea showed 70% of them expect to be hurt. Stephen?
Kate, thank you very much for that. Now, back here in France, those who harvest black truffles in the southwest of the country say they want help from the government to modernise their industry. They claim they can't keep up with competition from Spanish imports. Lauren Berstecker has more.
They may look like lumps of dirt, but these black truffles can actually fetch up to 800 euros a kilo. Despite the potential profits, business has been slow at this open-air market in l'Albanque in the south of France, as truffle growers are finding it increasingly difficult to keep up with their Spanish competitors.
They're better organized than us. We visited them twice, 13 years ago and again 3 years ago, and we're not even in the same league. They often have investors with massive terrains. We only have 2 or 3 hectares, which is nothing in comparison.
Last year, France produced around 30 tons of truffle, compared to Spain's 45. But the Spanish don't really eat truffles, meaning a large majority of these so-called black diamonds are exported and sold in France, Europe's biggest market. French truffle growers are denouncing what they see as unfair competition. They're calling on the government to emulate the Spanish model and help them modernize the industry.
The Spanish produce massively and they have a lot of help. They've developed cutting-edge truffle growing technology. We, on the other hand, have no support, no aid.
Truffle growers say markets like this one are also a boon for tourism, as they draw hundreds of visitors each year. But mostly they argue the government should do its part to protect the rare mushroom, which they see as an integral part of French culinary culture.
Well, that's it from us for now, but you can find the best of our business coverage on our Facebook page, France 24 Business, or you can tweet me with your comments @NewStephen. Until next time, thanks for watching.